When authors speak of rotations in music, it conjures the mental image of a circle, which to me implies an essentially endless loop. While this clearly illustrates the repetitive or circular nature of music, a different model, one that equally highlights the circularity and linearity of music, may prove to be more enlightening. To conceptualize musical form in a way that highlights both dimensions of musical time, I propose a view that envisages formal organization as a single helix, a line twisted up in circular segments. I call this helical form. The fundamental idea behind my conception of two dimensions of musical time, the circular and linear, and the resulting helical forms, comes from a passage in Paul Ricoeur's article, Narrative Time. He states that two qualities of time are thus intertwined, the circularity of the imaginary travel and the linearity of the quest as such. While Ricoeur considers this perspective in relation to narrative forms, I apply this idea to music, which similarly has repetitions that are bound in time, always proceeding to an inevitable endpoint. It's also worth noting here that repetitions are often more obvious in music than in their narrative counterparts. Before I get into my musical examples, I want to highlight some of the circular and linear aspects of music that are likely familiar to us, beginning with those that represent musical circularity. We often see repeat signs in sheet music, and we have common repeated sections in both pop and classical genres, like the verse-chorus, or in classical sonata form, things like the primary theme and secondary theme. We also have common repetitive chord loops that are found in pop songs, like the 1-4-5-1 progression, or longer progressions like in jazz standards that are repeated ad nauseum underneath a soloist. There are also many common signs of music's inherent linearity. Measures are numbered in music, which give the performer some idea of where they are in the piece. We also tend to measure music in terms of time, whether it be the clock or actual time of a piece, saying X song takes 3 minutes and 53 seconds, or the relative length of a work, when we state that a piece felt surprisingly short or another piece felt way too long. Additionally, one thing that we likely see every day is music players like Spotify and Apple Music tend to represent musical time as a line via a track progress bar. The most telling and perhaps most important sign of the linear dimension in music is the fact that every song, no matter how long, short, simple, or complex, is destined to eventually come to an end. When we go to play a song, we expect it to end. While we may be surprised as to how a song ends, we're not surprised that the song does in fact end. Now, it's worth noting that this might be changing somewhat with the advent of things like TikTok, where songs are frequently looped as if to never end. But even these TikTok famous songs, when taken out of their original context, which is TikTok, still have endings, and then when someone stops watching the TikTok, that song ends in that way as well. For this presentation, I focus on the endings of songs and how we reach that inevitable point where the song is no more. By approaching my analysis from this teleological perspective, I hope to highlight the prevailing linear dimension of musical time. So, how exactly does a song end? While an obvious answer may be that every song is different, and therefore every song ends differently, I propose here 5 prototypes for song endings, 3 of which are variants of what I call a fade-out ending. Number 1, fading out on the last chorus. Number 2, fading out on an improvised solo. Number 3, fading out on a recapitulation of the intro music. There are also two other ending types. Number 4, non-recapitulatory composed endings, and number 5, abrupt endings. Representative examples of each ending type can be found conveniently all on one album, Tomoko Aran's 1983 city pop classic, Fuyu Kukan. It's important to note, however, that these ending types are not limited to this album or city pop as a genre. And on top of that, it's also likely that there are numerous other ending types that I have yet to consider. First, let's go into a little bit of background on the genre and the specific album that I'll be focusing on. City pop is a subgenre of Japanese pop music from the late 1970s and 1980s. While there isn't one strict definition, the genre is often characterized by its Western stylistic influences, including funk, R&B, disco, new wave, synth pop, and others. The genre has also had a recent resurgence in popularity. In 2022, The Weeknd released Out of Time, a track which sampled Tomoko Aran's Midnight Pretenders, which is from the same album that I'll be looking at today. Additionally, both Universal Music Japan and Sony Music have begun re-releasing 1970s and 80s albums under the banners City Pop Selections by Universal Music and Auld Light City Pop Collection, respectively. Let's take a second to listen to The Weeknd's Out of Time and compare it to Aran's track Midnight Pretenders. And now, here's Midnight Pretenders by Tomoko Aran. Tomoko Aran's album Fuyu Kukan, which translates to Floating Space, was released initially on May 28, 1983, and was recently remastered and re-released by Warner Music Japan in 2022. All of the lyrics were written and are sung by Aran, while the tracks were composed and arranged by Masatoshi Nishimura. Originally having 9 songs, a 10th track, which is an alternate version of the song Dilemma, was added for the remastered 2022 re-release. The remainder of my presentation consists of a closer look at 5 songs from Fuyu Kukan, each of which feature a different ending type. Table 1 displays the entire formal organization of Body to Body. While we can't listen to the entire song today, there are a few notable moments that I'd like to mention. Verse 2 is notably only half as long when compared to verse 1, as if not to waste time getting to the more satisfying pre-chorus and chorus. After the solo bridge, we move straight back into the chorus. Here, it's as if the entire third verse and pre-chorus were cut out, a significant alteration to the relatively consistent intro, verse, pre-chorus, chorus cycles that have occurred up until this point. The terminal chorus is doubled in length and then faded out, the first of 5 ending types. This type of ending occurs when the final appearance of the chorus is repeated and then faded out. And other than Body to Body, it also appears on A Summer Tapestry and Shakuna Yesterday. Let's take a listen to the ending of Body to Body now. Track 3, I'm in Love, has an altogether different formal organization when compared to Body to Body. Here, the intro music is only present on the onset and conclusion of the song. Sandwiched in the middle are 2 complete verse, pre-chorus, chorus cycles and 1 partial cycle, consisting of a solo bridge and final chorus. I'm in Love reaches its terminus not with the chorus, but with the return of the intro material in the form of an outro. Here, extra reverb effects are added to the outro, which further signal the ending of the song. The second ending type intertwines the circularity and linearity of music. What begins our musical journey is in fact the very thing that ends it. In addition to I'm in Love, ending type 2 is also featured on the alternate version of Dilemma. Let's listen to the intro and outro of I'm in Love to hear the fade out with extra reverb. First the intro with no reverb, and then the outro. And now, the outro of I'm in Love. With Midnight Pretenders, the intro material, while not part of the primary verse, pre-chorus, chorus cycle, works its way back into the mix in between the second and third cycles. The placement of an interlude at this point could also be seen as a response to the absence of a verse 3 in the third cycle. In this interpretation, the interlude is functioning as a sort of replacement verse. Midnight Pretenders also includes a new ending type, and the final fade-out ending. In this case, a fade-out over an improvised solo. Here, the song ends with the solo by a keyboardist over a vamp that we haven't heard yet before. This ending type is also featured on Shakuna Yesterday. But let's take a listen to the ending of Midnight Pretenders now. The formal layout of Hanya is strikingly similar to I'm in Love. The intro and outros, which share the same material, flank the inner cycles of the song. Instead of a verse pre-chorus chorus cycle, like the previous 2 examples, the cycles in Hanya contain a verse, chorus, and bridge. The third cycle again is altered with an instrumental verse and no third bridge. There is one primary difference between the ending of Hanya and I'm in Love. Where I'm in Love simply fades out of existence, Hanya ends with an exclamation point, a fully composed and orchestrated ending that hasn't yet been heard. The new musical material for these endings is often only a few beats long and is added to an existing section, such as the intro. And other than Hanya, this ending type also appears on Baby Don't You Cry Anymore. Let's listen now to the ending of Hanya. final example is track 2, Lonely Night. Notably, this is the shortest example. Lonely Night clocks in at just 2 minutes and 24 seconds. Body to Body is the second shortest, at 4 minutes and 6 seconds. The brevity of Lonely Night is manifest in the formal design, which has 8 distinct sections. The rest of my examples had at least 10 sections. Still, though, there are similarities between this track and the other 4 we've looked at today. The intro material is again present at both the beginning and ending of the song. The internal form, however, is quite different, taking the shape of a 6-part rondo, which is like a 7-part without the final A. Another striking difference is the rather abrupt ending, our 5th and final ending type. Abrupt endings occur suddenly or unexpectedly, sometimes leading to a disorienting feeling. And in the case of Lonely Night, we don't even get a downbeat. The song ends on a beat 4 and then is followed by an out-of-time vocalization effect. This ending type appears on the track Dilemma in addition to Lonely Night. Let's listen to the ending of Lonely Night, which features this abrupt ending type. While it's important to address the highly repetitive nature of music, it is also important to consider the linearity of it. All music is a journey from a beginning to an inevitable and undeniable end. By focusing specifically on the terminal moments in a given song, I hope to shed light on how music reaches this pivotal moment when it ceases to exist. In my future research, I will more deeply integrate perspectives of other authors, and additionally, I will supplement the materials I presented today with more detailed harmonic and formal analyses of the 10 tracks on the album Fuyu Kukan. I'll conclude with a now well-known statement from Carolyn Abate. When music ends, it ends absolutely, in the cessation of passing time and movement, in death. And while I agree with Abate, I think her statement could use some optimistic course correcting. Even after one's death, life is preserved, or repeated, in a sense, through the memories of their loved ones. And similarly, a song that has ended is not gone forever. It's simply waiting to be replayed.